When a famous movie star walked up to a homeless man on one of the busiest streets in America and handed him a plain white box, nobody knew what was inside it. Not the tourists walking by, not the strangers who stopped to watch, not even the man who received it. The box had no writing on it, no logo, no ribbon, nothing that told you what was inside or why it was being given. Just plain white cardboard, slightly bent at one corner, held out by two hands that belonged to one of the most famous people on the planet. The homeless man's name was Marcus. He was 54 years old. He had been sleeping outside for 3 years. He was sitting on a cold sidewalk on Hollywood Boulevard with a broken boot and a piece of duct tape, trying to keep his soul from falling off completely, when the car pulled up. He looked up, and the man standing in front of him, holding out that box, was Keanu Reeves. Now, here is the part that nobody talks about. Marcus did not open the box right away. He carried it with him for 3 whole weeks, through rain, through cold nights, through 2 times when the city forced his camp to move and he had to pack everything he owned into 2 bags. That box came with him every single time, because something about it scared him. Not the box itself, but what might be inside it. And on the night he finally sat down under the bright lights of a Hollywood pharmacy and slowly lifted that lid, what he found inside changed everything. Not just for him, for someone else too. Someone who had been waiting and searching and refusing to give up for 3 years, 4 months at a time, without a single answer. When Marcus opened that box and read what was inside, his legs stopped working. He sat down hard on the sidewalk. He pressed something against his chest. He started crying so hard that strangers around him stopped walking. Someone called 911, and when the police arrived and ran his name through their system, the officer stared at her screen and then called her partner over and said 4 words that explain everything. Those 4 words are the entire reason this story exists. And I promise you, by the time you hear them, you will understand why a plain white box on a Hollywood sidewalk turned out to be one of the most quietly powerful things one human being has ever done for another. But to understand those 4 words, you first need to know who Marcus Webb really was, how he ended up on that sidewalk, and why Keanu Reeves, you out of every person in the city of Los Angeles that night, was the one who walked up and handed him that box. Stay with me. Because this story starts a long time before that Tuesday evening on Hollywood Boulevard, and it ends somewhere that nobody, not even Marcus himself, ever saw coming. The police cruiser rolled in slow. No sirens, no lights. Just the quiet crawl of a black and white patrol car easing into the curb on Hollywood Boulevard like it was trying not to wake anybody up. Officer Rosa Delgado stepped out first. Her hand rested on her radio, not her holster. Whatever she had been called for tonight, it was not a robbery. It was not a fight. She could see that much from 20 feet away, just from the way the people on the sidewalk were standing. When people witness something violent, they back away. They spread out. They look for exits. These people were not backing away. About 11 of them had gathered in a loose circle on the sidewalk outside a CVS pharmacy. A teenage boy had his phone out, not filming, just holding it, like he'd forgotten it was in his hand. An older woman in a blue pharmacy vest was standing near the door, with her hand pressed flat against her mouth, her eyes wide and soft. A man in a business suit had his briefcase on the ground beside him, abandoned, like he'd set it down without thinking and simply not picked it up again. They were all looking at the same thing. A man. He was sitting on the sidewalk, cross-legged on the cold concrete, his back straight, his head up. He was wearing torn jeans and a gray army jacket that had seen a lot of weather. His boots were old, one of them wrapped at the sole with a strip of silver duct tape. He was holding a phone to his ear with both hands, like it was made of something precious, like if he held it too loose, it might float away. And he was crying. Not the quiet kind, not the kind people do in movie theaters, blinking fast, pretending the tears are not there. This was the other kind, the kind that does not ask permission, the kind that comes out of somewhere deep and old, and has been waiting a very long time to get out. The kind of crying that makes strangers stop walking. Rosa Delgado had been a police officer for 11 years. She had heard a lot of different kinds of crying. She knew the difference between grief and anger and shock and pain. She did not have a word for this kind. She would spend 3 days later trying to find one for her incident report, all going through word after word, distressed, overwhelmed, emotional, and throwing each one away because none of them were right. She finally wrote, "The individual appeared to be experiencing a profound emotional response consistent with unexpected positive news. But that was later. Right now, she just walked toward him, slowly, the way you approach something you don't want to startle. On the sidewalk next to the man, beside his left knee, sat a box. A plain white box, the size of a shoebox, maybe a little smaller. No writing on the outside, no logo, no label, no bow. One corner was slightly bent, like it had been carried around for a while. Just white cardboard, ordinary and plain, sitting on the Hollywood Boulevard sidewalk, like it had simply appeared there. "Sir," Delgado said. She crouched down to his level. "Sir, are you hurt?" The man did not answer. His eyes were closed. His lips were moving slightly, like he was listening to something and trying to hold on to every single word. Delgado looked at the box. She looked back at the man. Her partner, Officer Jameson Briggs, stepped up beside her. "Someone called it in," he said quietly. Woman walking by said a man collapsed on the sidewalk. Possible medical. "He didn't collapse," the woman in the pharmacy vest said. She had moved a step closer, her voice hushed. "He just sat down, real sudden, like his legs stopped working. And then he started crying." She paused. "He's been on that phone for almost 7 minutes." Delgado waited. The man slowly lowered the phone from his ear. He opened his eyes. They were red and wet. His face was a wreck, and the way faces get when they have stopped trying to look like anything in particular. But there was something else in his eyes, behind all that water and red. Delgado could not explain it. She would try later, and fail. It looked like a man who had just been told something he had stopped letting himself believe. "What's your name, sir?" she said. The man looked at her. He took one slow breath. He looked down at the white box beside him. Then he looked back up at her and said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Marcus Webb." Delgado typed the name into her radio panel and waited. 43 seconds. The radio crackled. She read the screen. She read it again. "Briggs," she said. Her voice came out careful and quiet, the way voices do when a person is working very hard to sound normal. "Come look at this." Briggs looked. Neither of them spoke for a moment. On the sidewalk between them, Marcus Webb sat with his hands in his lap, and the white box beside him, and his eyes closed again, like a man resting after a very, very long walk. He had no idea what was on that radio screen. He had no idea the answer to the question, why the police had to be called. Had nothing to do with the box. It had everything to do with his name, and what someone, 3 years ago, had done with it. But to understand that, you have to go back further than 3 years. You have to go back to Compton, California, in 1965, to a small house on East Compton Boulevard where a woman named Evelyn Webb was raising a boy, mostly on her own, and making it look easier than it was. Marcus Elias Webb was born on March 3, 1965. He grew up in that small house with his mother and, for the first 4 years of his life, a father named Gerald, who smelled like cigarettes and left before Marcus started school. Marcus did not remember him clearly. Just the cigarettes and a pair of brown work boots by the front door that were there one morning and gone the next. He did not miss him the way you miss someone you knew well. He missed him the way you miss a door that was never really open, with a dull, permanent ache that lives in the background and does not have a name. Evelyn Webb worked 2 jobs, days at a laundromat on Rosecrans Avenue, folding other people's clothes with quick, practiced hands. 3 nights a week she took the bus downtown and cleaned offices in a high-rise building on Figueroa Street, riding the elevator up 20 floors in the dark and mopping floors that would be walked on by people who never thought about who had cleaned them. She did all of this without complaint, not because nothing was hard. Because complaining, she told Marcus once, was a tax on your own energy, and she did not have energy to spare. Marcus was not a bad student. He was not a great one either. He liked history. He liked maps more than history, actually, the way a map could hold the whole shape of a place in a single image. The way you could put your finger on a dot and say, "This is where I am," and know it was true. In the library at his middle school on Mir Street, he once spent an entire lunch period reading about Beirut, Lebanon. He had seen it mentioned on the news but never thought about it until he found a photograph in a book. Wide boulevards, tall palm trees, people in summer clothes sitting at outdoor cafes beside a blue sea. The caption called it the Paris of the Middle East. Then the book explained what happened next. The Civil War that began in 1975. The bombs, and then more bombs, and then the life leaving the city slowly, and then all at once, the way life leaves things. Marcus stared at the photograph for a long time. He did not know, at 12 years old in a library in Compton, that a boy born in that same city, born the year before Marcus, in 1964, would one day change his life. He joined the United States Army in 1984, at 19. His mother drove him to the recruitment office on a Tuesday morning and hugged him on the sidewalk outside without saying much. She was not a woman who used a lot of words for important things. She saved her words for ordinary things and let the important ones speak for themselves. Marcus served for 9 years. He was a good soldier. Not reckless, not fearless. Those were not the same thing as good. He was steady. He showed up. He did what was asked. In 1990, he was deployed to Saudi Arabia as part of Operation Desert Shield. In January 1991, when Operation Desert Storm began and coalition forces moved into Kuwait and southern Iraq, Marcus Webb was there. He saw things that do not fit neatly into sentences. He was wounded in February 1991. Shrapnel, left shoulder, not life-threatening. And he came home in the summer with a Purple Heart and a discharge that said honorable in clean black letters. He also came home with something else. Something that had no medal and no letter. Something that sat behind his eyes during loud noises and made crowds feel like ambushes and made sleep feel like a place he could never quite get all the way into. In 1993, his VA doctor called it readjustment difficulties and gave him a pamphlet. Marcus called it nothing. He just kept moving. He got married in 1994 to a woman named Charlene Price, who was patient and warm, and believed genuinely that love was enough to hold most things together. They had a daughter in 1996. They named her Delia. For a while, things held. Marcus worked construction. He drove a delivery truck, and he fixed things that needed fixing and showed up to the dinner table and tucked Delia in at night and read her books about maps. Always maps, always the shape of the world. And she would fall asleep with her finger on some faraway place. But holding something together takes energy. And some mornings, the energy was simply not there. The marriage ended in 2007. Delia was 11. Marcus packed 2 bags and left the apartment in Inglewood on a gray February morning, and the last thing he saw before he closed the door was Delia's backpack hanging on the hook in the hallway, purple with a small keychain shaped like a star. He told himself he would get back on his feet. He told himself that every single year after. The years went by anyway. By 2017, Marcus was living in a tent near the L.A. River. And if you have ever driven through Los Angeles on the freeway and looked down and seen the rows of blue tarps and shopping carts stretched along the dry concrete channel below, you have seen where he lived. He had a neighbor named Tommy Park, 62 years old, who had a shaking right hand and a portable radio that picked up a soul music station on Wednesday nights. They played cards and listened to old songs and did not talk about the past more than they had to. And 11 miles away, in a life that looked nothing like theirs, a man who had lost things of his own was about to learn Marcus Webb's name. But first you need to understand something about that man. Not the movies, not the fame, not the face on the poster. The actual man underneath all of that. Keanu Charles Reeves was born on September 2nd, 1964, in Beirut, Lebanon, and the same city Marcus had read about in a library in Compton. The same boulevards, the same palm trees, the same blue sea, though by 1964 the war had not yet started, and the city was still the thing it would later only be remembered as. Beautiful, alive, unaware of what was coming. His father was Hawaiian Chinese, his mother English. His name was Hawaiian. Keanu means cool breeze over the mountains. And from the very beginning he was a person who did not fit neatly into a single category, which is either a very hard thing or a very freeing thing, depending on the day. He grew up moving. Beirut to Sydney, to New York, to Toronto. New schools, new neighborhoods, new sets of faces that would be familiar for a year and then disappear. He learned early that nothing stays the same forever, and that the only thing you could really carry from place to place without it getting heavy was who you were on the inside. He found theater in Toronto, drama, the strange and specific relief of becoming someone else for a little while, and then coming back to yourself and finding yourself still there. He came to Los Angeles in the mid-1980s, found his footing slowly, and then suddenly, the way careers in Hollywood either die or explode, he became one of the most recognized faces on the planet. Bill and Ted, Point Break, Speed, The Matrix, and then John Wick, which came out in 2014 and reminded people who had maybe started to look past him that he had never actually gone anywhere. By 2019, he was 55 years old, and he was, by most measurements, at the highest point of his professional life. But professional life and actual life are two different things, and Keanu Reeves's actual life had been shaped, more than anything else, by loss. In October 1993, his closest friend, the actor River Phoenix, died outside the Viper Room nightclub on Sunset Boulevard. He was 23 years old. They had been young men together in Hollywood, finding their footing in the same strange world at the same strange time, and losing River left a mark that Keanu never talked about publicly and never fully got over privately. That is the nature of that kind of loss. It does not resolve. It just becomes part of the landscape of who you are. In December 1999, Keanu and his girlfriend, Jennifer Syme, were expecting a daughter. The baby was stillborn at 8 months. They named her Ava Archer Syme Reeves. They held her. They said goodbye to her. And then they carried her with them, the way parents carry children they never got to keep, invisibly, always, in the part of themselves that nobody else can see. In April 2001, Jennifer Syme died in a car accident on Cahuenga Boulevard in Los Angeles. She was 28 years old. 3 losses, 3 people, 3 holes in the shape of a life that no amount of success or money or recognition could fill. Grief like that does something to a person. Not always a bad something. Sometimes it opens a door inside you that stays permanently open. A door that leads directly to other people's pain. A door that makes it impossible to pass suffering in the street without feeling it land in your chest, like it is partly yours. Keanu Reeves had walked through that door. The stories in Hollywood were quiet and numerous, and he had given away a reported $75 million of his earnings from the Matrix films to the crew members, the special effects teams, the costume departments, the people who worked 18-hour days and went home to apartments in Burbank and Van Nuys and never saw the kind of money a film like that generated. He never confirmed the number. He never talked about it at all. He had set up a private foundation for childhood cancer research after his sister Kim was diagnosed with leukemia. He did not put his name on it publicly. He had been photographed on the New York City subway, sitting in a crowded car, standing up to give his seat to a woman who had just boarded with heavy bags, then holding those bags in his own lap for 6 stops. He did not know anyone was filming. He almost never knew anyone was watching. In June 2019, at the E3 gaming conference in Los Angeles, he was on stage when a man in the audience shouted, "You're breathtaking!" And Keanu stopped everything, pointed straight back at him and said, "You're breathtaking. You're all breathtaking." The internet celebrated it for a week. The people who actually knew him just nodded. That was him. Exactly and completely him. What none of those people knew, what no reporter wrote about because it happened the way real things happen, quietly and without announcement, was that in the fall of 2019, Keanu Reeves had been working with a woman named Sandra Okafor for almost 2 years. Sandra ran a small nonprofit called Open Door out of a cramped office on Vermont Avenue in Los Angeles. Open Door did one specific thing. It found veterans who had lost contact with their families and tried, carefully and patiently, to help put those connections back together. It was slow work. It involved VA records and old addresses and phone numbers that had been changed 6 times over, and family members who sometimes did not want to be found, and veterans who were certain, wrongly, that the people who had once loved them had simply moved on. Keanu had been funding Open Door since 2017, quietly, consistently. On a Tuesday evening in early October 2019, Sandra called him. "I've got a case," she said. "A man named Marcus Webb, Army veteran, Gulf War. His daughter has been looking for him for 3 years. We found him. He's camped near the LA River." Keanu was quiet for a moment. Outside his window, Los Angeles spread itself out in every direction, lit up and enormous and full of people living lives that would never make the news. What does he need?" Keanu asked. "That," Sandra said, "is exactly what I wanted to talk to you about." What followed was a phone call that lasted 40 minutes and changed the direction of at least 3 people's lives, though none of them knew it yet. Sandra had been thorough, the way she always was. She had Marcus's full file ready, his Army records, his VA history, the missed benefits, the years of displacement, the tent near the LA River. She read the important parts out loud and let the silence after each one do its own work. Keanu listened without interrupting. That was something Sandra had noticed about him in 2 years of working together. Most people, when you told them a hard story, filled the hard parts with words. They said, "Oh, wow, and that's terrible, and I can't imagine." It was not unkind. It was just the way people protected themselves from the full weight of someone else's pain. Keanu did not do that. He just let it land. All of it. His daughter, Sandra said. Delia Webb, 23 years old. She filed a missing persons report in October 2016. It's still open. She has never withdrawn it. She paused. I spoke to her last week. She's been checking in with the police every 4 months for 3 years. Every 4 months, Keanu repeated. Every 4 months, Sandra said, without fail. Another silence. Does Marcus know she's been looking? He asked. No, Sandra said. He thinks she moved on. He told one of our outreach workers back in August that his daughter was better off without him in her life. He said it like it was simply a fact. Like the sky being blue. Keanu said nothing for a moment. When then, what does he need, Sandra? Practically. Walk me through it. And Sandra did. She walked him through the VA benefits that Marcus had never claimed. Healthcare, housing assistance, a monthly disability payment that had been sitting uncollected for years because Marcus had not known how to start the process and had been too deep inside his own shame to ask. She walked him through the housing application that her team could complete on his behalf, ready for his signature. She walked him through the prepaid phone, the one safe and simple way to give a man, without an address, a line back to the world. And then she told him about the Purple Heart. One of our outreach workers found out from a man in his camp, a friend of his named Tommy, that Marcus pawned his Purple Heart in 2008. A shop in Long Beach. We tracked the shop. The medal is still there, unclaimed. She let that sit for a second. I'd like to get it back to him. Keanu said, buy it back. It costs. Buy it back, he said again. Quietly. Not impatiently. Just settled, like a decision that did not require any more discussion. Sandra bought it back. The rest of the plan came together over the following 3 weeks. Sandra's team completed the VA paperwork. They sourced the prepaid phone and loaded a single contact into it. They rented a storage unit on Lancashire Boulevard in North Hollywood and paid it up for a full year. They placed inside it everything a man would need for a careful, dignified beginning. Clothes in the right size, boots with solid soles, a prepaid card with enough money to move through the world, while bigger things sorted themselves out. And Keanu wrote a letter. He sat at a table in his house in the Hollywood Hills on a November evening, and he wrote it by hand, 2 pages, in the plain and direct way he had always spoken. Without performance, without decoration, just one person talking to another across the page. He put the letter in the storage unit, propped against the wall. Then he put everything else, the phone with Delia's number already saved, the storage key, the VA letter, the photograph Sandra had gotten from Delia, into a plain white box. No logo, no ribbon, no card on the outside, just the box. On the evening of November 14, 2019, Keanu drove his black Tesla down out of the Hollywood Hills and onto Hollywood Boulevard. Sandra had told him where Marcus walked on Tuesday evenings, the route to the church dinner on Cahuenga, the bus stop, the last 6 blocks on foot. He parked in a loading zone outside a CVS pharmacy and sat in the car for a moment. He was not nervous. He was something quieter than nervous. Careful, maybe. Aware that what he was about to do was not something you could undo, that once a man opened a door that had been closed for 12 years, there was no closing it again. and you had better be sure the thing on the other side was real and solid and true. He was sure. He got out of the car. He walked around to the trunk. He stood on the sidewalk with the white box under his arm, watching the stream of evening foot traffic move around him. Tourists and locals and workers heading home, all of them wrapped up in their own directions. And then he saw a man sitting on a low concrete step beside a parking sign, with one boot off, pressing silver duct tape against the split sole. And he was wearing a gray army jacket. Keanu crossed the sidewalk. He stopped in front of him. The man looked up, and for 4 full seconds, Marcus Webb and Keanu Reeves looked at each other on a Hollywood Boulevard sidewalk, while the city moved around them like a river around 2 rocks. Marcus recognized him immediately. You would have to have lived completely off the grid for 30 years not to recognize that face. And even then, even in 3 years of living rough near the LA River, even with a broken radio and no television and no internet. Marcus had seen John Wick on a screen in a shelter common room in 2015 and remembered the face clearly. He almost said the name out loud. The way you almost say the name of something surprising before your brain catches up and tells you to be still. He didn't say it. He looked back down at his boot instead, because Marcus Webb had never been the kind of man who made other people feel like exhibits in a zoo, and he was not about to start. He heard Keanu's voice above him. "Hey," Keanu said. Simple, ordinary, the way you say it to anyone. "Hey," Marcus said back. He looked up again. Keanu was holding the box out toward him. Marcus stared at it. "It's for you," Keanu said. Marcus did not move. He looked at the box, and then at the man holding it, and everything in him that had learned to be careful about unexpected things tightened slightly. "I don't," he started. "I know this is strange," Keanu said. He lowered himself slightly, not fully crouching, but bending enough that his eyes were closer to Marcus's level. His voice was even, not performing, not the voice of a man who wanted to be seen doing a kind thing. Just a voice. "You don't know me. I mean..." Something moved briefly across his face. Not quite a smile, but close. "You know the movies. You don't know me. And I don't know you." "Not really." He set the box down on the step beside Marcus's knee. "But someone who does know you asked me to give you this," he said. Marcus looked at the box. The cardboard was plain and white. One corner slightly dented. No writing on it. Nothing that told him what was inside or where it had come from or why it was sitting 3 inches from his left hand. "Who?" Marcus asked. Keanu shook his head slowly, not dismissively. More like a man who has been asked to give away the ending before the story has been told and is choosing, gently, not to. "Open it, and you'll know," he said. He straightened up. When he looked at Marcus for one more moment, with that expression Marcus could not read. Not pity, not guilt, not the performance of generosity that Marcus had seen on people's faces before when they handed him things and needed him to be grateful in a visible way so they could feel good about themselves. This was none of that. It was just regard. The specific regard of one person who has known real loss looking at another person who has known real loss and recognizing it and not looking away from it. Then Keanu turned and walked back to his car. Marcus watched him go. The Tesla pulled away from the curb with the near-silent pull of an electric engine, smooth and quiet. There, and then, gone. Marcus sat alone on the step with the white box beside him, and his boot still half-taped in his hand, and the noise of Hollywood Boulevard all around him. And he did not open the box. He sat with it for 10 minutes. Then he picked it up, tucked it under his arm, and walked to the bus stop. He carried it back to the camp without opening it. He put it in the corner of his tent, behind his sleeping bag, and he lay down and looked at the ceiling of the tent in the dark and listened to the freeway and did not sleep. The problem was not that he didn't want to know what was inside. The problem was that he wanted to know too much, and wanting something too much was dangerous. Marcus had learned that the hard way, over many years, in many different ways. Want something too much, and the wanting itself becomes a kind of wound, because the world is not organized around the things you want. The world is organized around the things that simply happen. And the gap between those two things, between what you want and what happens, is where people break. So he left the box alone. Tommy noticed it the next morning. He stood in the entrance of Marcus's tent with his coffee, instant, made on a small camp stove, and tilted his head at the white cardboard in the corner. "What's in the box?" Tommy asked. "I don't know," Marcus said. Tommy looked at him steadily. "You don't know what's in your own box." "I haven't opened it." "Why not?" Marcus thought about the word afraid. He turned it over. He decided it was too large and too dramatic for a Tuesday morning conversation, so instead he said, "I'm not ready yet." Tommy was quiet for a moment, the way he was quiet about most things, not emptily, but fully, like the silence was doing something useful. "That makes sense," he said finally. He went back to his own tent, and the box stayed in the corner. 3 weeks passed. The camp moved twice. The city cleared sections of the riverbed on November 2nd and again on the 9th, and each time Marcus packed everything he owned into 2 bags and the box and walked to the next stretch of concrete and set up again. He wrapped the box in a plastic bag when a cold front moved through on the 20th, and the rain came sideways under the tent flap. He checked on it at night, the way you check on something you cannot afford to lose. He told himself he would open it tomorrow. Every day for 3 weeks, he told himself, tomorrow. Then, on the evening of November 14th, Tommy sat down beside him outside the tent and told him about his daughter in Sacramento, the one he had been too afraid to contact for 2 years, the one he thought was better off without him. Tommy did not tell Marcus to open the box. He just told his story, quietly, in the way that the right story at the right moment does not need to announce itself. Marcus sat in the dark for a long time after Tommy went inside. Then he stood up. He picked up the box. He walked toward the light. Not metaphorically. Literally. The camp near the L.A. River sat in a stretch of darkness between 2 freeway overpasses, where the city's glow pooled on either side but never quite reached the middle. Marcus had lived in that middle for 2 years. He knew its specific dark, the way you know the layout of a room you have slept in for a long time. Not by seeing it, but by feel. He needed to see tonight. He walked 40 minutes to Hollywood Boulevard. The same route he had walked 3 weeks ago with the taped boot. The same bus for most of it, and then 6 blocks on foot. He had the new boots on now. He had been wearing them since the day after Keanu handed him the box, because his old ones had finally given out completely, and the new ones had appeared in his path with such specific timing that refusing them would have been absurd. He had accepted the boots. He had not accepted the rest of it yet. He found the step outside the CVS pharmacy on Hollywood Boulevard. The same low concrete step beside the parking sign. He sat down on it, the box in his lap, and looked at it for a long moment under the cold white light of the pharmacy sign above him. The street moved around him. Tourists, workers. Saw a man in a Spider-Man costume counting his tips beside a hot dog cart. A woman on a phone, laughing, her heels clicking fast on the Walk of Fame stars set into the sidewalk. Nobody looked at Marcus. That was okay. He wasn't here for them. He pulled the plastic bag off the box. He lifted the lid. The first thing he saw was the phone. A simple smartphone, prepaid, fully charged, screen lit faintly in the box like a small window, with light on the other side. A blue, sticky note was pressed to the front of the screen. The handwriting on it was quick, but deliberate, the handwriting of someone who thinks before they write and means what they put down. It said, "One number is saved in this phone. Press call. She's been waiting." K. Marcus's hands went still. He read the note again, then again. The words were not complicated, and they were 6 words and an initial, and they were the most loaded 6 words Marcus Webb had read in his entire life. She's been waiting. He set the phone carefully on his knee and looked back into the box. Beneath where the phone had been was a small manila envelope. He picked it up. It was not sealed. He opened the flap and tipped the contents into his palm. 3 things fell out. The first was a key on a plain metal ring. A small white tag was tied through the ring with a piece of string. On the tag, in the same handwriting as the sticky note, North Hollywood Storage. Unit 44. The things that are yours. Marcus closed his fingers around the key. The second thing was a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it with one hand, the key still held tight in the other. It was a printed document. Official, formal, dubbed with a VA letterhead across the top, and his full name printed beneath it. Marcus Elias Webb. His social security number. His service dates. His discharge status. Honorable. He read down the page slowly. He had to read certain sections twice, because his brain kept sliding off them, the way your eyes slide off something too bright. The document stated that a certified VA benefits advocate had completed a full application on his behalf for health care coverage, monthly disability compensation, and housing assistance through the Department of Veterans Affairs. The application was finalized and active. It required only his signature and a single in-person appointment at the West Los Angeles VA Medical Center on Wilshire Boulevard to be processed. Everything done, everything ready, just waiting for him to show up and say yes. I am here, I exist, I am owed this. Marcus folded the paper and held it against his knee. He was not ready for the third thing yet. He could see it still in his palm. A small rectangle, face down, the back of a photograph. He could see that much. He knew what a photograph looked like from the back. He turned it over. A young woman, standing outside somewhere. Trees behind her. Natural light. The kind of light that means afternoon in California. She was laughing at something off to the left of the camera, her head turned slightly, caught in the middle of a real laugh, not a posed one. The kind of laugh you only get in a photograph when the person doesn't know the camera is pointed at them. She had her mother's eyes. Wide set, dark, quick. She had Marcus's nose. The specific slope of it. Since the slight bump at the bridge that Marcus had always considered his least attractive feature, and which looked, on this young woman's face, like something that simply belonged there. She had a jaw that was entirely her own. Marcus had last seen this face when it was 11 years old, gap-toothed and serious, standing in the doorway of an Inglewood apartment in February 2007, holding a purple backpack with a star-shaped keychain. She was 23 in this photograph. 12 years of a face he had missed. 12 years of a person growing up and becoming herself without him. He turned the photograph over. On the back, in the same handwriting, "Her name is still Delia. She filed a missing persons report for you 3 years ago. She never stopped. K. She never stopped." Marcus Webb had built, over 12 years, a very careful and very specific story about his daughter. The story went like this. She was better off. She had her mother. She had moved forward. She did not need the weight of him added back into a life that had learned to be fine without him. The story was not happy, but it was survivable. It was the story that allowed him to keep going without being destroyed by what he had left behind. That story had just been proven wrong. In 6 words on the back of a photograph. She never stopped. Marcus pressed the photograph against his chest with both hands. The way you press something to yourself when you are afraid that if you hold it at arm's length, it will disappear. He sat like that on the step outside the pharmacy for a long time. Then, because there was nothing else to do, because there was only one direction left in the world, and it was forward, he picked up the phone from his knee. He pressed the home button. The screen lit up fully. He went to contacts. One entry. The name was simply Delia. His thumb hovered over it. He thought about all the reasons not to press it. He had a long list. He had been building that list for 12 years. It was a detailed list, well organized, full of specific and reasonable-sounding entries. He pressed call anyway. 1 ring, 2 rings, then a voice. Young. A little uncertain. Real. Hello? Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Not because he had nothing to say, because he had 12 years of things to say and no idea, not a single idea, which one to send first into the space between himself and his daughter. He made a sound. Just a sound? The kind that lives below words, the kind that carries what language is not fast enough to carry. On the other end of the phone, silence. And then, Dad? Marcus Webb's legs stopped working. He sat down on the sidewalk very fast, like something had been removed from his knees without warning, and the cold concrete came up to meet him, and he did not care at all. The phone was pressed to his ear. He was crying. Across the street, a teenage boy stopped walking. Nearby, a woman in a pharmacy vest pushed open a glass door and stood in the entrance, watching. Someone, somewhere close, quietly called 911. But Delia Webb did not know that yet. She was sitting on the floor of her apartment in Inglewood, California, with her back against the couch and her knees pulled up to her chest, because when the phone had rung with an unknown number at 6:47 in the evening, she had been so tightly wound with waiting that she had slid right off the cushion without noticing. She had been waiting for 5 weeks. Not the passive kind of waiting. Not the kind where you go about your days and simply check your phone occasionally and carry on. The active kind. The kind where waiting becomes its own full-time occupation. Where every unknown number makes your heart do something complicated. Where you rehearse conversations in the shower and on the bus and in the middle of meetings where you are supposed to be paying attention to other things entirely. Sandra Okafor had called her in early October and explained in her careful and professional way that she worked for a nonprofit called Open Door, that they helped reconnect veterans with their families, and that she believed she had located Delia's father, Marcus Elias Webb, and that a plan was being put into place to make contact. What kind of plan? Delia had asked. Sandra had explained. When she got to the part about who would be making the initial approach, Delia had gone very quiet. Then she said, "Why would he do that? Why would someone like him care about my father?" And Sandra had said something that Delia wrote down on a piece of paper afterward and taped to the inside of her kitchen cabinet door, where she would see it every morning when she reached for her coffee cup. Some people just have more room in them for other people's pain. You meet them sometimes. They're the lucky ones. Delia had thought about that sentence a great deal over the following 5 weeks. But she was 23 years old, and she had been building herself carefully and deliberately for a long time. She had grown up in Inglewood with her mother Charlene, who had eventually remarried a quiet and decent man named Robert, who worked for the city and came home on time and never raised his voice. Robert was not Delia's father. He did not try to be. He was simply a steady and reliable presence in a house that had previously known what his absence of drama felt like from the other side. And Delia was grateful for him in the specific way you are grateful for things you cannot fully articulate. But Robert being good did not make the missing smaller. Children do not subtract a missing parent simply because a present one is adequate. The math does not work that way. The missing stays its own size regardless of what is added around it. Adelia had been 7 when her father was present every day, 11 when he left, 15 when the birthday cards stopped coming, 19 when she had finally sat down on her bed one night and let herself be furious, genuinely, completely, without managing it, and had cried until the fury burned itself out and left something quieter behind. Not peace, not forgiveness, just the absence of active fire. She had filed the missing persons report at 20 years old. She had walked into the Inglewood police station on a Tuesday afternoon in October 2016 with a folder of documents. Her father's last known address, his social security number, his army discharge papers that her mother had kept in a shoebox in the closet. And she had sat across from a police officer and said, "I'm looking for my father. And he's a veteran, and I believe he may be homeless somewhere in Los Angeles County. I want him found." The officer had been kind, but honest. Missing adults who chose to leave were complicated cases, he said. If her father did not want to be found, "He thinks I don't want him," Delia said. She said it flatly, without drama. The way you say things you have thought about so many times, they have lost their sharp edges and become simply facts. "He's wrong. I want him found, so I can tell him he's wrong." She had checked in every 4 months without fail for 3 years. September 2017, January 2018, May 2018, September 2018. Every 4 months. A phone call to the case officer, a quiet voice asking if there had been any updates, a polite thank you when the answer was no, a walk back out into the world to wait another 4 months. But she had never withdrawn the report. Not once. When the phone rang at 6:47 p.m. on November 14th, she picked it up on the second ring. She said hello. She heard nothing. Then she heard the sound. It was not a word. It was not crying, not exactly, not yet. It was the sound that lives in the space before crying, the sound a person makes when language temporarily stops working because something has happened that is too large for words to process in real time. She knew it immediately. Not his voice. He hadn't made a word yet. Something below the voice. The frequency of him. The specific human signal of her father that she had carried inside her since she was 7 years old, and that no amount of time or absence had managed to erase. "Dad?" she said. What happened next she would spend years trying to explain to people and never quite manage. On the wall came down. That was the only way she could describe it. A wall she had been building since she was 15 years old. Carefully, sensibly, brick by brick. Because you cannot walk around with an open wound forever. Because life requires you to function. Because loving someone who is gone is expensive and exhausting, and you have to put the cost somewhere. That wall simply stopped existing. Not gradually, not with warning, just gone. She slid the rest of the way off the couch onto the floor and sat there with her back against it and said, "I looked for you. I never stopped looking." His voice came back then, broken and small and absolutely, completely his. The voice she remembered from bedtime stories about maps, from Saturday mornings, and from the specific sound of her name in his mouth which no other person on earth pronounced the same way. "I didn't know," he said. "I thought you were—" "I know what you thought," she said. She was not angry when she said it. She had used up the anger years ago, in that 19-year-old bedroom, and what was left was something cleaner and more honest than anger. "You thought I was better off," she said. A silence. "Yeah," he said. "You were wrong, Dad." A longer silence. The kind that is not empty but full, packed tight with 12 years of things that needed to be said, and were finally, after all this time, being said. "Yeah," he said again. The first "yeah" had shame in it. Old, heavy shame, the kind a person carries so long it starts to feel like part of their skeleton. The second, "yeah," had something else in it entirely. On the specific relief of a person who has been holding a wrong belief for so long that being corrected does not feel like defeat. It feels like being set down, like putting something heavy on the ground and straightening up and finding out your back still works. They talked for 41 minutes. They did not solve 12 years in 41 minutes. That is not how 12 years works. 12 years is not a problem with a solution. It is a distance, and distances are covered slowly, step by step, without shortcuts. But they made a beginning. And Delia Webb, sitting on the floor of her apartment in Inglewood, with her back against the couch and tears running off her chin, and a smile on her face so wide it almost hurt, understood something she had not let herself fully believe in a very long time. Beginnings were enough. Beginnings were, and in fact, everything. On Hollywood Boulevard, 11 miles away, her father was sitting on a sidewalk holding a phone like it was made of something precious. A woman in a pharmacy vest was watching him. A police cruiser was rolling slowly to the curb. And a plain white box, its work now done, sat open on the concrete beside him like a door that had finally been walked through. Officer Rosa Delgado had seen a lot of things in 11 years with the LAPD. She had responded to calls on Hollywood Boulevard more times than she could count or cared to remember. She had seen fights outside nightclubs and medical emergencies on the Walk of Fame, and tourists who had lost their wallets and children who had lost their parents and people who had lost, in various ways and to varying degrees, their grip on reality. So Hollywood Boulevard at night was its own specific universe, governed by its own specific rules, and Rosa Delgado knew those rules the way a sailor knows the behavior of a particular stretch of water. She had not seen this before. She crouched down beside Marcus Webb and looked at him carefully, the way she had been trained to look at people, checking for injury, for intoxication, for the particular vacancy in the eyes that meant something medical was happening. His eyes were clear, red from crying, wet, but clear and present, and entirely aware of where he was and who was crouching next to him. "Sir," she said, "my name is Officer Delgado. Can you tell me how you're feeling?" "I'm fine," Marcus said. His voice was rough, scraped clean by 40 minutes of the most important phone call of his life. "I'm okay. I'm sorry someone called. I wasn't trying to cause a scene." "You don't need to apologize," Delgado said. She meant it. "Can I ask your name?" "Marcus Webb." She typed it into her radio panel with the practiced speed of someone who had done it 10,000 times. She waited. Beside her, Officer Jameson Briggs was managing the small crowd. Not aggressively, just presence, the calm professional signal that said, "Everything is under control here. You can go about your evening." The teenagers with their phones had drifted away. The man in the business suit had picked up his briefcase. The crowd was thinning the way crowds do when the emergency turns out not to be an emergency. The radio crackled. Delgado read the screen. She read it a second time, slowly, making sure she had not misread it the first time. She had not. "Briggs," she said, and her voice came out carefully level, the way voices do when a person is actively working to keep something out of their tone. "Come look at this." Briggs excused himself from the remaining bystanders and stepped over. He looked at the screen over her shoulder. Neither of them spoke for a moment. What the screen showed was this: a missing persons report, case number 16-047823, filed October 9th, 2016, at the Inglewood Police Department. Reporting party, Delia Charlene Webb. Relationship to missing person, daughter. Status of case, open and active. 3 years, 1 month, and 5 days. That was how long Marcus Webb had been officially missing. That was how long his daughter had been waiting for exactly this moment. For a radio to crackle somewhere in the city, and a screen to show his name with a location attached to it. Delgado straightened up and looked at Marcus. He was watching her. He had the phone held loosely in his lap now, the call finished, and the white box open beside him with its contents, the envelope, the VA letter, the photograph, arranged carefully on the concrete like he had taken them out and looked at them again while she was processing his name. "Mr. Webb," she said. She kept her voice steady and calm. "I need to tell you something." "Okay," he said. "Your daughter filed a missing persons report on you in October 2016. She paused, watching his face. "It has been open for 3 years. Active and open, meaning she has never withdrawn it." Another pause. "That means, officially, as of tonight, you are a missing person who has been found." Marcus was very still, not the stillness of shock, and the stillness of a man receiving information that confirms something he has only just, in the last 41 minutes, begun to allow himself to believe. "I have to file a found report," Delgado continued. "I need to document your location, confirm your identity, and notify the reporting party." She stopped. "That means your daughter. I'm required to notify Delia Webb that—" "She already knows," Marcus said quietly. Delgado blinked. "I'm sorry?" He held up the phone. "We already talked. Tonight. That's—" He stopped. He looked at the phone in his hand for a moment, like he was still slightly amazed it was real. "That's why I'm sitting on the sidewalk." Delgado looked at the phone. She looked at the white box. She looked at the VA letter, and the photograph, and the storage key arranged on the concrete beside him. She was a practical woman. 11 years on the force had made her practical in the specific way that the job makes you. Not unfeeling, but organized about feelings. Good at sorting what required action from what simply required witnessing. Right now, she was witnessing something. She was not entirely sure what to call it. "Someone put this together for you," she said. It came out less like a question than a statement of something she was still processing. "Yeah," Marcus said. She looked at the blue sticky note still attached to the phone. She read the 6 words, and the single initial at the bottom. She did not say the name out loud. She straightened up fully and looked at Marcus Webb sitting on the sidewalk of Hollywood Boulevard with his found things around him and his found daughter 11 miles away and his found self, still rough, still uncertain. He's still a long way from wherever he was going, but found, and she did something that was not strictly required by her training. She said, "I'm glad you're okay, Mr. Webb." He looked up at her. "Me too," he said. She filed the found report. She documented his location, confirmed his identity against the missing persons file, cross-referenced his VA records, and submitted the paperwork that officially closed case number 16-047823 after 3 years, 1 month, and 5 days. Later, driving back down Hollywood Boulevard with Briggs quiet in the passenger seat, she thought about a missing persons report filed by a 20-year-old girl who had walked into a police station with a folder of documents and refused, for 3 years, to withdraw it. She thought about what that kind of refusal costs a person, and she thought about what it is worth. Odd Marcus Webb thought about it too, sitting on that sidewalk after the police cruiser pulled away, after the last of the small crowd had dispersed back into the Hollywood Boulevard current, after the woman in the pharmacy vest had given him a quiet nod through the glass door and gone back to her register. He thought about a 20-year-old girl walking into a police station alone with a folder. He thought about every 4 months for 3 years. He thought about the specific arithmetic of that. How many mornings she had woken up, and the report was still open, still active, still a declaration to the world that Marcus Webb was not forgotten, that someone was still counting him as someone worth finding. He sat with that arithmetic for a long time. Then he picked up the box, put everything carefully back inside it, tucked it under his arm, and walked to the bus stop. He had a storage unit to visit. He went 3 days later. Not the next morning, though part of him wanted to. He made himself wait because he had learned, in the last 3 weeks of carrying an unopened box, that some things needed to be approached slowly. That arriving too fast at something important was its own kind of mistake. The way you could read the last page of a letter before the first, and technically know the ending, but have missed the whole meaning of it. He wanted to arrive at Unit 44 ready. Tommy came with him. Marcus had not asked him to. On the morning of November 17th, he had simply stood up and started getting his jacket on, and Tommy had stood up too, without a word, and put his own jacket on, and that was that. "You don't have to come," Marcus said. "I know," Tommy said. And they took 2 buses to Lancashire Boulevard in North Hollywood. The storage facility was a large complex set back from the street. Rows of orange roll-up metal doors running along clean concrete corridors under long fluorescent lights. The kind of place that smelled like dust and old cardboard, and the specific neutrality of stored things, objects between chapters of someone's life, waiting. Marcus had the key in his jacket pocket. He had checked for it twice on the bus. He found the second corridor on the right. He walked to the end. Unit 44. He crouched in front of the roll-up door and put the key in the padlock. His hands were steady. He was surprised by that. He had expected them to shake. He looked at Tommy. Tommy nodded once. The way he nodded at things that mattered. Small and certain. Marcus turned the key. He pulled the door up. Since the unit was small and clean and lit by the corridor fluorescence spilling in from behind them. About 8 feet wide and 10 feet deep. Bare concrete floor. A metal shelf bolted to the right-hand wall. On the shelf sat 2 boxes. Below the shelf, propped against the wall, was a white envelope with a single word on the front. Marcus. He stood in the entrance for a moment and looked at all of it. Then he stepped inside. He went to the smaller of the 2 boxes first. It was sitting on top of the larger one, no bigger than a cigar box, not sealed, the lid just resting on top. He lifted the lid. Inside, on a small square of dark velvet cloth, was a medal. He knew what it was before he fully processed seeing it. The way you know certain things, not with your eyes, but with something older than your eyes. His hand moved toward it without him deciding to move it. A purple heart. His purple heart. The one he had earned in Kuwait in February 1991, when a piece of shrapnel from a rocket-propelled grenade had opened up his left shoulder during a ground assault near the Al Burkan oil fields, and he had kept moving, because stopping was not an option, and the man to his left needed cover, and the mission needed finishing. The one he had pawned in 2008 at a shop on Atlantic Avenue in Long Beach on a Tuesday afternoon when the motel rent was 11 days overdue, and the choices had narrowed to one. He had felt the shame of that for 11 years. Not loudly, not in a way he talked about, just a low, constant hum underneath everything else. The specific shame of a man who had given away something that was given for valor. It's as if valor itself had a price, and he had discovered what it was. He held the medal in his palm. It was lighter than he remembered. Or maybe he was stronger than he had been in 2008. Both things could be true. Tommy was standing at the entrance to the unit with his back turned, giving Marcus the room he needed. His shoulders were doing the thing they did when Tommy was feeling something he had decided not to show. A slight inward pull, like a person quietly holding themselves together. Marcus closed his fingers around the medal. He stood like that for a moment. Then he put it in his jacket pocket, against his chest, and turned to the envelope. He picked it up from the floor. He opened it. He pulled out 2 pages of handwriting, close and careful, and he read them standing up in the small lit space of Unit 44, while Tommy kept his back turned and the fluorescent light hummed above them both. He read it once quickly, the way you read something when your eyes are moving faster than your comprehension, because you cannot slow them down. Then he read it again slowly. The letter said that Marcus's VA application was complete, that the Purple Heart had been tracked to a pawn shop on Atlantic Avenue in Long Beach and bought back 3 weeks ago, that the storage unit was paid for a full year, that the sealed box on the shelf contained clothes in his size and a good pair of boots, and a prepaid card with enough money to move through the world while larger things arrange themselves? It said that the phone call had been the only real thing in the box. And it said, "That daughter deserves her father back, and you deserve to know she never stopped." It was signed with a single letter. Marcus folded the letter twice and placed it inside his jacket, next to the Purple Heart, next to the photograph of Delia. He stood for a moment with all 3 of those things against his chest and breathed slowly in the small, clean space of a storage unit in North Hollywood on a November morning. He thought about a boy born in Beirut in 1964, who had grown up moving from place to place and learned early that loss was real and that other people's pain deserved to be felt and not looked away from. He thought about Sandra Okafor making phone calls and tracking pawn shops and filling out VA paperwork on behalf of a man she had never met. He thought about Delia in a police station at 20 years old with her folder. He thought about Tommy, still standing at the entrance with his back turned and his shoulders doing that quiet, holding together thing. He thought about how many people had pointed themselves, in one way or another, in his direction. How many small and large decisions had been made by other people. People with their own grief and their own exhaustion and their own reasons to look away, who had chosen instead to look toward. He turned to the sealed box on the shelf. He pulled it down. He carried it to the entrance and set it on the ground and broke the tape and opened it. Inside, 2 changes of clothes, folded neatly. A pair of boots, dark brown, solid-soled, his size exactly. A duffel bag. A prepaid card in a small paper sleeve. And at the bottom, a receipt. A pawn shop receipt from a store on Atlantic Avenue in Long Beach. He dated 3 weeks ago. Item description: U.S. Military Purple Heart Medal, Gulf War era. Amount paid. The word redeemed stamped across it in red ink. Someone had driven to Long Beach. Someone had walked into a pawn shop and laid money on a counter and said that medal belongs to a man who earned it, and I need it back. While Marcus had been sitting in a tent in the dark, carrying an unopened box and being too afraid of hope to lift a cardboard lid. Someone had been making that drive. He held the receipt for a long moment. Then he looked at Tommy. Tommy had turned around now. He looked at the boots. He looked at the receipt in Marcus's hand. He looked at Marcus's face. "You should probably throw those duct-taped ones in the river," Tommy said. Marcus almost smiled. It came out as almost a smile and almost something else. Something that did not have a name. "Yeah," he said. Tommy looked at him for a steady moment. "You're going to be okay," he said. He said it the way he said everything important, plainly, without theater. The way you state something you have looked at carefully and determined to be true. Marcus thought about it. Outside the storage facility on Lancashire Boulevard, the November sun was thin and pale and present, the way California winter sun is, not warm exactly, but there, doing its job, showing up. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I think I am." And the thing about saying something out loud, the thing Marcus would come to understand more fully in the months that followed, is that it changes the shape of it. Believing something privately is one thing. Saying it to another person in the thin November sunlight outside a storage facility in North Hollywood is another thing entirely. The words leave your body and become real in the air, and then you are accountable to them in a way you were not before. Marcus Webb had said he was going to be okay. Now he had to go be okay. That turned out to be the hardest and most important work of his life. He signed his VA paperwork on December 3, 2019. Sandra Okafor drove him to the West Los Angeles 5 a medical center on Wilshire Boulevard herself. She brought 2 coffees in paper cups and met him outside the main entrance at 9 in the morning, small and precise and unhurried in the way that people are unhurried when they have chosen work they genuinely believe in. Marcus had been to this building before. Years ago, in the early 2000s, when he still had an address and a phone number and had made one attempt to navigate the VA system before the paperwork overwhelmed him, and the shame of needing help overwhelmed him more, and he had simply stopped going. It looked the same from the outside. But this time, Sandra was beside him, and she had the forms already organized in a manila folder, tabbed with colored stickers at every place requiring his signature. And she walked him through each one in the waiting room with the same calm patience she brought to everything. And when Marcus's hand slowed on the last page, she said, quietly and without drama, "That's the housing one. That's the important one. Take your time." He signed it. 3 hours later, he walked out of the West Los Angeles 5 Ibra Medical Center with an active benefits case number, a scheduled medical evaluation for the following week, and a housing assistance application in process. He stood on the sidewalk on Wilshire Boulevard and looked at the case number printed on the top of his paperwork. It was a number that meant the government acknowledged he existed. It sounds like a small thing. It was not a small thing. He met Delia on December 7, 2019. Sandra had suggested neutral ground, a diner, somewhere with other people, enough ambient noise that the silences would not feel like waits. They chose a place called Rosie's on La Brea Avenue in Inglewood, a corner diner with red vinyl booths and a counter that ran the length of the room, and a smell of coffee and butter that had been soaking into the walls for 40 years. Marcus arrived first. He chose a booth by the window and sat with his hands around a coffee cup and watched the door. Delia came in at 9:10. She was wearing her nursing school jacket, dark blue, her name embroidered on the chest in gold thread, and she carried herself the way her mother had always carried herself, with a straightness in the spine that was not stiffness, but something closer to dignity. The posture of a person who had decided, a long time ago, that the world was not going to fold her. She saw him before he saw her see him. She stood in the doorway for 3 full seconds. Marcus would carry those 3 seconds for the rest of his life. The way her face moved through things, recognition, then something complicated and private that he did not have the right to name, then something that settled, slowly, like a decision being made in real time. She walked to the booth. She sat down across from him. "Hi, Dad," she said. "Hi, Delia," he said. They looked at each other across a diner table in Inglewood on a December morning, and neither of them said anything for a moment, and it was not comfortable exactly, but it was honest, and honest was the only place they had agreed, in their phone calls over the previous 3 weeks, to begin. They ordered eggs. They talked for 2 hours. Not about everything. You cannot cover everything in 2 hours over eggs at a corner diner. They talked about the things that were closest to the surface: her nursing school, his storage unit, the VA appointment, Tommy, Sandra, the phone. They talked around the harder things carefully, the way you walk around furniture in a dark room, knowing it is there. I'm not ready to look at it directly, but not pretending it isn't there either. Before she left, Delia put her hand flat on the table between them. Not reaching for his hand, just placing her hand on the table, open, palm down, the way you put something down that you want to leave in a place. "Same time next week?" she said. Marcus looked at her hand on the table. "Yeah," he said. "Same time next week." Tommy Park was connected to Open Door in February 2020. It took longer. Tommy was harder to move, not because he cared less, but because he had been carrying his particular weight longer, and it had settled deeper into his bones. He told Marcus 3 times that his daughter Minji was better off. Marcus told him 3 times that he was wrong. And the 3rd time Marcus said it, he said it with the specific authority of a man who had been wrong about the same thing and found out the hard way. Tommy called Minji in March 2020. He called Marcus afterward and said only, "You were right." Marcus said, "I know." Sandra Okafor expanded Open Door through 2020 and 2021 on additional funding she never publicly attributed. By the end of 2021, the organization had reunited 47 veterans with family members who had spent years believing they were searching for someone who did not want to be found. Every single one of those veterans had wanted to be found. Every single one had simply stopped believing they deserved to be. Marcus moved into transitional housing in Culver City in January 2020. Sent a 1-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor of a quiet building on Sepulveda Boulevard with a window that looked out over a parking lot and a radiator that knocked in the night, and a kitchen with exactly enough room for one person to cook a simple meal. On his first night there, he stood at the window for a long time. He thought about all the other windows, the tent flap that let in the cold, the shelter window that looked onto a concrete yard, the Long Beach motel window with the broken blinds that never fully closed. All the windows he had looked out of in the last 12 years that had felt like someone else's windows. The windows of a life that was not quite his, a life he was passing through on the way to something he had mostly stopped believing was waiting. He placed the Purple Heart on the windowsill. He placed the photograph of Delia on the bedside table. He put Keanu's letter in the drawer beside the bed, folded twice, and on the nights when the weight came back, because it came back, it always came back, that was the nature of the weight. He opened the drawer and took out the letter and read it again. Not because he needed reminding of what it said, because handwriting is one of the most human things in the world, and the specific shape of those letters was the shape of someone reaching across the dark toward someone else, and that reaching, even on the page, even weeks and months after the fact, still felt like something warm. And in the spring of 2021, A reporter from a small online publication pieced together part of the story from the police report and the found persons filing and a source close to the CVS pharmacy on Hollywood Boulevard. The story was incomplete and got some details wrong, but the broad shape of it was true enough that it spread. People wanted to know if it was Keanu Reeves. His representative released 3 sentences. Mr. Reeves is not able to comment on private matters. He would like to note that the work of Open Door Veterans Reconnect is genuinely worth your attention and support. That is all. That was all. Marcus Webb became a registered home health aide in March 2023. He works part-time for a care agency in Culver City, visiting elderly veterans in their homes, helping with medications and paperwork, and the 1,000 daily things that become enormous when you live alone and your body or your mind has begun to work against you. He is good at it. He is good at it because he knows what it means to need help and be unable to ask for it, and because he knows that the asking is not the hard part. The hard part is believing, before you ask, that you are worth the answer. He visits Delia every other Sunday. They eat breakfast. Sometimes they drive out to the coast and walk along the water and talk about ordinary things. Her clinicals, his clients, the traffic, the weather, the small maintenance of a life being lived forward. Sometimes they talk about the hard things, the 12 years, the leaving, the looking, the finding. They do not rush either kind of conversation. They have learned that time, which once felt like the enemy, is actually on their side now. Forgiveness, Delia told him once, walking along the water at Santa Monica, is not a door you open once. It is a door you keep choosing to walk through, again and again, until one day you realize you are no longer choosing. You have simply arrived on the other side. They are still walking through it. That is enough. Somewhere in Los Angeles, on any given day, a man gets into a car and drives to wherever he needs to be. And he does not speak about the things he has done. And the things he has done do not ask to be spoken about. They exist the way good things exist when no one is watching. Quietly. Permanently. For real. On November 14th, 2019, a plain white box was handed to a man on a sidewalk on Hollywood Boulevard in Los Angeles. The police were called. Not because anything had gone wrong, because a missing person had finally, after 3 years and 1 month and 5 days, been found. And what someone had done with his name, the someone who had refused, for 3 years, to close a missing persons report, had turned out to be the most important thing anyone had ever done with it. Her name was Delia. She never stopped. And that is the story of a plain white box, a homeless veteran, a daughter who never stopped looking, and a man who chose to do something quietly extraordinary when nobody was watching. Before you go, I want to ask you something simple. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city, your country, or even just a hello in the comments below. Every single time I read those comments, it reminds me that kindness is not just one famous person handing a box to one stranger on one street. It is every single one of you, from every corner of this world, choosing to stop and listen to a story like this one. That matters more than you know. If this story moved you even a little, please hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it tells the world that stories about real human kindness are worth sharing. It helps this video reach someone who might need to hear it today. And trust me, somewhere out there, someone does. And if you are not subscribed yet, please do it now. Every week we bring you stories exactly like this one. True stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Stories that remind you, on the hard days especially, that the world still has good in it. Spread kindness. It costs nothing, and it changes everything. Now click on the video appearing on your screen right now, because the next story is already waiting for you, and I think you are really going to want to hear it.